This is the Double Doink Dynasty League podcast with Boyer, Andy, and your host, Tyler.
It's impossible.
Season's going to end on a double doink.
Welcome back to Double Doink Dynasty podcast, presented by your performance-enhancing dads. What's happening, fellas?
Hi.
Staying alive.
Andy, everything good at your house?
Yeah, everything's
Boyer.
good because I'm in playoffs.
That's right. Boyer, struggling with kids. I struggled last week. It's been rough. It's sad dad life, but
It's just how it works this time of year, man.
it's a Boyer thing too. Boyer, I think all Boyers get sick pretty regularly.
Oh, yeah, at least once a week. I think that's the quota that we try and hit anyway.
So, all right. Well, this week we're going to hit playoff scenarios for everybody, and then we're going to hit the trade deadline that just passed. We're going to hit all the trades. We got 10 of them coming at you. So, Andy, you want to start with some playoff scenarios for us?
Yep. This should be quick-ish. All right, so for the top division, Matt and Ty can still win the division if either of you manage to go 3-0 while Boyer goes 0-3. Because you're both 3 games back, and tiebreaker is division record, and if either of those happen, Boyer would be, I think, 2-4 in the division, and you or Matt would have 3 wins at least because you just won 3 division games. So you would win the tiebreaker if that happens. It's a very narrow window, obviously, but you're going to need help from Paul.
I ain't scared.
Paul and Matt,
I'm going
to need a lot of help here.
So that's top division. Middle division, yay, nailed it. I'm in. Bottom division, Mattoon's got a 2-game lead in the division with 3 to go. If he goes 1-2 while Kelly or Jerfry win out, then it would go to the division record tiebreaker. Kelly would win a division record tiebreaker 5-1 to 4-2 for Mattoon. Jerfry would push at 4-2 apiece. Then they would push the head-to-head because that means that Jerfry would have won their matchup with Mattoon, putting them at 1-1. And then they would almost certainly lose in the total points conversation because they're like 200 points back with 3 games to go. So too long didn't read. Colin Kelly can win the division by gaining 2 games on Mattoon. Jerfry needs the full 3-game jump to avoid losing a tiebreaker with Mattoon. So steep order there too. It looks pretty comfy that me, Boyer, and Mattoon are in, but I'm the only one that's done it officially. 3 games left. For wild card, Jerfry and Colin Kelly play each other in week 15, which could likely be what determines the wild card. Either way, one of them wins that game and puts one of those teams at 8 wins, ignoring what happens in week 13 and 14, which means that Undy, Andrew, Matt, and Ty would all need to go 3-0 to get to 8 wins and then hope for a points tiebreaker. And that also means that Burns doesn't sneak in there, that Jerfry or Colin Kelly don't win another game to go to 9 wins. So you're all hoping for 3-0 and help to be in the conversation for wild card. Burns could sneak in there. He's only a game behind, and his points Burns' points. His points are better than either Kelly or Jerfry right now. So he only needs to find a game somewhere, and one of those 2 teams is going to lose when they play each other. So, and they both have to play Mattoon, which is a freaking juggernaut who's added. We'll talk about that. So Burns has a window, and Burns' team's pretty decent. So we'll see.
They won the championship last year.
Sure did.
All you got to do is sneak into the playoffs. So
those are your playoff scenarios. I'll send this very brief Word document out to the league sometime after the podcast goes live so that you all have to watch the podcast first.
Make sure you sneak it in there when there's like 15 gifts just to
It's not going to be 15 gifts because Nolan's on a gift strike trying to win a bet that nobody made.
That's fair.
So, all right. Well, with that, we have a bunch of trades to cover. So we're gonna jump over to that. And maybe some of these will affect how the rest of the playoffs play out here. So, Boyer, back in the middle of November, bought Dak Prescott for a 25 first. Andy, you want to jump into that one for me first?
I get it, but I don't like it. Boyer's got Justin Herbert back 3 weeks ago. Herbert had been trash, but his offensive line's very beat up. He didn't have any receivers to throw to. It's just him and Eckler out there dumping all over the place. So, like, I get wanting to get another quarterback in there because we just talked about Boyer's probably making playoffs. But giving up a first for just another option at quarterback, like, Dak at this point was just coming back off of his injury, or had played a game or two. Like, he's not flashed a lot. Cowboys have been running a ton. A lot of teams have been running a ton this year. So I don't feel like he came out that much ahead. And giving up a first to do it's a lot, even if it is a 2025 first. So I'm not a huge fan, but I get what you're trying to do. So Ty, what'd you think?
So what I'll say is, in theory, I'm not opposed to it. 25 first. It's a ways down the road. You're looking at Herbert was rough. Dak should have been getting better, but they've been running the ball a lot in Dallas. But I mean, he has a fairly young team. I mean, comparatively, Boyer's team is still fairly young, which means a lot of these assets are just going to accrue value, would be my guess. Chris Godwin's going to get better. AJ Brown's not going to lose value. DK Metcalf, I think, is only going to gain value if not that Geno's been bad, but the Seahawks have a bunch of picks. As that gets better, DK is going to have maybe even a better price. He's got Andrews. If something goes wrong, he can easily find a 25 first in a year or two. So for this year, for next year, I like it because really, if Herbert has issues, if something else goes wrong, Boyer didn't really have another quarterback. So put a second quarterback on this team. It is a one quarterback league. So do you need a second stud quarterback? No. But if something goes wrong, it's not a bad thing to have. So getting rid of a first 2 years down the road, I think he can easily come back and flip somebody to get a 25 first. And I don't have a problem with it right now.
Andy, I will let you know right now that I didn't like it either, but it was something I felt like I needed to do if I wanted to be not just competitive for playoffs, but I was going to try and compete for an actual championship. But when you look at like Mattoon's team, like,
I mean, Dak doesn't make you Mattoon's team.
no, his team is stacked, and there's no doubt about that. But if I'm hoping to squeak one by him in the playoffs at some point, I'm going to need a quarterback who scores more than 12 points, and that's really what Herbert had been doing. And I trust Dak most of the time to do that. He doesn't always do it, but he definitely has the ability to hit 20 points on a regular basis, and sometimes hit 30 or 40 if it's the right mixture of things.
Yeah, he had that stretch. Was it early last year when he was throwing for like 450 yards for 3 straight weeks?
Yeah, so he has the ability to do it, and actually, since Herbert got Keenan Allen back, he's been a lot better. So he might end up starting for me for the rest of the year. I don't know, but at the time, I was looking at it and I was like, oh man, like I don't want to spend 2 firsts on a Mahomes type guy, or I don't want to, like, Derek Carr wasn't going to do it for me. Like, I needed someone who I could start and play if Herbert continued down this path this year. But I'm still banking on Herbert being a stud for the next 8 to 10 years. So it's a one-time thing. I didn't like I wanted it for like a seconds was really where I wanted to go. He pushed me to a first, and I felt like it was a deal I kind of had to make, and Tyler's right. I being so far out, I wasn't too worried about it. I figured
There's nothing to say you can't flip him. Like, somebody's going to need a quarterback at some point. You might get that first back, or at least
or
get a 24 second, and then you're not out as much.
Right.
Yeah. So all right. Well, let's move on from that. The next trade, Lee Sack sent Melvin Gordon. Let's talk about that guy for a second, huh?
This is
Lee,
before he got released.
yes, pre-release. Lee Sack sent Melvin Gordon to Underhill for a 24 and 25 fourth rounder. So 2 fourth rounders for Melvin Gordon. Everybody knew Melvin Gordon was pretty much on the downswing. Dude fumbled the ball, gets put on the bench, gets his job taken by Murray. This is post Lee Sack's big send off. So him getting rid of Gordon just to grab a couple more picks. I'm not a big fan of fourth rounders, but Gordon's on a practice squad right now, so getting 2 fourth rounders, better than nothing.
Yeah, it's crap for both teams because we'll see here, or no, I guess most of these trades happened. The Hopkins and the Diggs trade happened on the last podcast. So Andrew's flush with picks. His taxi is going to be crowded.
Yeah.
So these fourth rounders are getting dropped pretty much immediately, I'm assuming. And it's not like fourth rounders hold that much value that he could flip them for something else. So, and Melvin Gordon also pretty droppable right now. So seems like a fair deal.
Yep. All right, Boyer, we're on board with that. We move on.
We're on
Okay,
board.
Let's do that. All right. So the next one, Mattoon sent Paris Campbell to Jer Fry for a 24th third. Boyer, you're gonna take us on that one. Paris Campbell for a 24th third.
Yeah, I mean, since Matt Ryan took the job back, not sure why he lost it, but since he took the job back, Paris Campbell has looked good. I don't think this is a multi-year play. I still think Pittman is going to be the main guy there for the future. But Campbell is definitely looking at as like the more consistent player right now. And Jer Fry making a playoff push, having a player like that you could put in a wide receiver 3 or flex is not a terrible player to have. And giving up just a third 2 years from now or whatever is a more than fair value. I'm not sure Andrew would have gotten any more than that from anybody else. So the value seems right. And I think it helps Jer Fry, try and make that little push that they've been making for most of the year.
Yeah, so Campbell had a stretch of, I'm going to round, 12 points, 13 points, 7 points, 2 points, and then 13.5 points was the 5 games leading up to this trade. So like had really come on as a guy doing a fair amount of work. I think that was happening while Ryan was out, but either way, he looked like a guy that would be worth adding, and a 3rd round pick to just get a guy, that's fine.
Well, and if you look at Jer Fry's bench, you've got Will Fuller, which does not have a team. And other than that,
That surprised you guys?
I mean, a little bit. I thought he'd be on a team, but I didn't expect a lot out of him. So, but if you look at Jer Fry's bench, he's got 2 bench quarterbacks, a bunch of bench running backs, and then a tight end. So, I mean, he pre this Marquise Hollywood Brown trade we're going to talk about, he really didn't have anybody for wide receiver on the bench. So grabbing Paris Campbell made total sense for a third because it helped fill some extra spots. If Juju, Debo, somebody has a injury or has something go wrong. So just roster construction wise, it made total sense for Jeremy to grab another wide receiver. So, all right. So the next one, this is Sunday night, right before trade deadline. Trade deadline's Monday, end of the game. So this is our last one pre-Monday. Sunday night, I trade Mac Hollins to Underhill for a 25 third.
All right.
Which one of you wants to take that one?
I think we could be quick with this one. Boyer, would you rather have a 29-year-old Mac Hollins or a 25-year-old Paris Campbell for a 3rd round pick?
I would rather have the younger fella.
Ty, you got an opinion on that?
Mac Hollins was going to be dropped in the offseason because there's, according to my roster construction, a 29-year-old Mac Hollins is pretty much worthless on my team.
He's ancient for you.
Truth. Yeah, Undy really likes these like late veteran players, adding Gordon and Mac Hollins, but I mean, a 25 third, whatever. Like
I
at this
was
point, there's not a ton of value there, but there will be in a few years.
I was just
And
happy to get a
Mac
third out
Hollins
of it.
isn't good. Yeah, you should have gotten a fourth.
So
Mac
Underhill
Hollins has less value than Melvin Gordon in my eyes.
So this was going. This was going to be short, but here. So Underhill offered me Greg Dortch plus a later pick for Mac Hollins. And I was like, I don't really want Dortch. It's not a big deal. And you have 0 fourths. So like, I'm not backing up to fifth. I'm not taking a fifth. So we can either do, you give me Dortch and I'll give you a third to get a second. And he's like, no, I'm not giving up a second. I said, okay, then it's going to be a third. And he said, all right, fine. I guess it's a third. So here we go. You know, if you don't have fourth rounders, I can't back up any.
That's fair.
So I said, it's going to be a third. Give me your furthest one out. And that's the one I got. So
that's all you can do. All right, Ty, move us into a much more interesting trade.
All right. So now, for the most part, these get fairly fun. These are trade deadline Monday night. Colin Mattoon sends the 101, supposedly. Still could be the 102, but pretty obviously going to be the 101. A 24 fourth and a 25 first. So the 101, a 25 first, and a fourth. Lesak sends back Jonathan Taylor, a 23 third, a 24 fifth, and a 25 fifth. So let's cancel out the fourth and the 2 fifths because those really don't matter. So you're looking at the 101 and a 25 first for JT and a third. Boyer, start us up on that one.
Oh man, I don't know. Last year I think this probably makes more sense from Mattoon's side. I don't necessarily think he needs Jonathan Taylor. But he's got a ton of running backs. I mean, he ended up trading Kamara later, which we'll get to. But like this guy's team was so stacked to begin with that I don't necessarily think he needed to do it. And by holding on to the 1-1 and getting Bijan next year, like that was just going to massively increase his window. Now, Jonathan Taylor is a young enough player and he's very, very good. So it could lengthen that window out anyway. But we've also seen Jonathan Taylor struggle on the current team that he's on. What are the chances they get that turned around? Could they end up going into mediocrity after this? Could they end up tearing down the team? Because, I mean, they're in this like weird position where it's like, I mean, they got to do at least a little mini tear down to try and figure out how to put together a winning team again. And Jonathan Taylor could become a casualty of that. So I personally, I get it. Adding Jonathan Taylor sounds really sexy. I don't know if it's the move I would have made in Mattoon's situation where he had the roster that he had. I think he should have stayed, gotten younger with that pick, that 1-1, which is insanely valuable, especially in the 23 draft, and trusted that his team was already stacked enough to win the championship this year.
I think I don't disagree with anything that you said, but I disagree with not liking it for Mattoon's side. Mattoon's team is very, very good. But, and we talked about this going into this year, not that we thought Mattoon's team was going to be bad, but it's an older, good team. He's got Diggs, who's 30. He's got Chubb, who's been around forever. He's got Aaron Jones, who's been around forever. So this year, Mattoon's team is stacked. Last year, his team was stacked, and he didn't win the championship. So from a this year perspective, I get feeling the fire under his feet to make sure that he wins a championship because this is his window. But as I love Bijan Robinson as a prospect. I'm very excited for him to come into the league. We don't know where he's going to go, and we've seen talented players land in shit situations, or talented players just not do what we expect them to do when they come into the NFL. He's an unknown. Jonathan Taylor is 23, was the #1 overall fantasy player last year. And even this year, where he's very much not the #1 overall fantasy player, he's still decent. He's still a very solid piece, especially on a team that's got Josh Allen and Diggs and Mike Evans and all the players that Mattoon has. This keeps him very, very good, but slightly younger next year, without having to hope that Bijan Robinson lands in the right spot and comes out of the gate contributing, because we've seen stud rookie running backs like Jonathan Taylor not do it for the first 2/3 of a season. So I think this makes sense because Mattoon does get younger. He gave up the 101 next year, but that 101 doesn't help him in the same way that Jonathan Taylor probably does. It could end up being horrible, but it could end up being horrible for Andrew too if Bijan Robinson gets drafted by the I don't know, a bad team. You get it.
But let me ask you though. Like Dameon Pierce has come down the back half of the season, but Dameon Pierce was a top 10 running back for the first 10 weeks. And
Sure.
he was drafted to a bad team, and he was not drafted near as high as Bijan's going to be. So even if he goes to a bad team, presumably he can still be a top 12 running back easy.
Well, honestly,
Yeah,
it's
I think
probably worse if he goes to a good team that's got a running back already. Like if you look at, I mean, what happened with Javante last year? It's like, okay, well, we're gonna keep your legs fresh. We're gonna mix you in. You're gonna get half of the snaps, but we want to run the tires off our veteran because why wouldn't we? And like a mediocre team that's maybe gonna be good and kind of see how things go and ease their rookie into it, which is effectively what the Colts were a couple of years ago too. Like that's a rough situation. A bad team can do whatever they want, and a good team, even if you're not getting everything because Mahomes throws for 5,500 yards or whatever, like you still follow your way into touchdowns in that scenario. But those mediocre teams is where we've seen it not work. So my point is, Bijan's an unknown.
Yeah.
He's a very, very high upside unknown who I would love to have on my team. But I understand what Mattoon's team is, and with Mattoon's current team, I'd rather have Jonathan Taylor than Bijan Robinson next year.
Yeah. So the benefit, I think this makes total sense for both teams. You guys have touched on it. But Lesac now has the 101 and 102 pretty much locked up. So whether that's top wide receiver along with Bijan or Bijan and Gibbs combo, or whoever the hell he feels like is going to be his corner pieces, I think it should be a wide receiver, because I get grabbing Bijan, but selling out everybody, you need a cornerstone. And for Lesac, I get you have a whole bunch of first rounders, but did this make it enough to sell JT as a cornerstone piece? I don't know.
I think that we have to remember also that generally the 1-1 is considered to be worth really 2 firsts. If you were to try and sell the 1-1 in the offseason, chances are he's going to ask for 2 firsts. And if Bijan goes to the right spot and they gets the hype, there's argument for 3 firsts to be made for him. So there is a massive value. There is some shifting that can do, like Andy said, where he goes and where the hype takes him. But value-wise, there's a maximum value here of essentially like 4 firsts for Jonathan Taylor, and that definitely sounds right. It's just a matter of whether there is a lot of unknowns, like Andy said, as far as where does he go? Is he going to get the playing time? Is he going to be like Breece Hall, where he, is in a timeshare for 2 games and he's running back 5 until he breaks his leg, or is he going to be like a Javonte Williams or something like that disappoints for a year even too? So you get it for each side. Like it's totally understandable. I think the value is there probably for both sides. I don't know if I'm Mattoon if I'm doing that, because I like to have that super younger, really high ceiling player, and Jonathan Taylor has that ability, but he'll be 24 next year. That's almost getting old for running backs.
Not when you're JT.
I know, it was just a joke.
But in theory, Jonathan Taylor is good for another 3 years. at
Right,
least.
right.
And that's what
Yeah,
you play
It's just
Dynasty
how
for.
good.
Right. Right. He should be, I imagine, at least a top 15 running back for the next 3 years, which that's nothing to wag your finger about. Plus, I mean, he's probably going to be top 5 is probably the more likely option that he goes as long as his offensive line stays healthy and the Colts don't just completely punt each season from here on out.
So Lesak has 10 first right now between the next 3 years.
Man.
Which is stupid. It's good,
ridiculous.
but it's stupid. My question is, how good does this rebuild get, or does this flop?
Well,
I mean,
Lesak
it's
is
going
going
to
to
take
have the most.
time.
Lesak is going to have the most fun
Right,
in the drafts. That's for sure. He's going to be the one that's just he's excited. He's ready for the draft now if he could do it.
And here's the thing: if some way somehow these 4 or 5 first round picks this year hit, and they all hit, he could move 24 and 25 first to buy somebody this next year if he
Right,
wants
which
to
is
start
essentially-
competing.
Sure, absolutely.
Which is
So I
essentially
get-
what you did this year.
Right.
I mean, Walker ended up working out. You had good young running back or wide receivers. So you went and spent some of those first out on Mahomes, and now your team went from like literally bottom of the league to potentially threatening for division. Like you're not out of it for division now, and next year it's going to be probably between me and you duking it out for it. So he could
That's the hope.
absolutely have that same run of getting some good young players that end up working out and then spending some of those firsts on some of the maybe the older veterans that are going to be guaranteed points for him, and all of a sudden in 2 years we're like, holy cow, how did that happen? That was quick.
Yeah. So
Right.
here's how I see it. Like, Ty had Kenneth Walker, he had Gibson, he had J.K. Dobbins, he had Higgins, he had Amon-Ra St. Brown, he had Bateman, he had Freiermuth. Call that the first couple of rounds of having too many picks in the first couple of rounds over the last 2 or 3 years. That's what Andrew's at, right? And then Ty still had picks to go and get stuff. If we look at Andrew's team right now and look at anything even remotely resembling a key player over the next 3 years, Jamison Williams,
Which is still unknown.
Elijah Mitchell,
When he can't
Second
play,
knee
he can't.
injury.
I was like, that
Rondale
guy-
Moore.
I was
Like
like, that guy can't
those
stay
are
on
your
the field.
top 3 guys in terms of dynasty value on the roster right now. Like, this is a full teardown. And
Right. Well, I guess my
even
point
with
was
Bijan and even with turning a couple of future picks into guys, like Andrew's hoping to be where Ty's at 2 years from now, and Ty's still mid rebuild, hoping to be good next year. Like, this shit takes time.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Andrew, take your picks and hold them and work through the rebuild.
Right.
don't give
That's
them.
all
back
I'm
to
going to tell
Platoon.
you. As
Don't
I've
give them
been
back
there,
to Platoon.
as I've been there, work through this rebuild. Trade a couple first, fine. Back up, get more picks, whatever. But work through this rebuild and don't go blow all your picks on a big name right now. You committed to it, stay committed to it.
Right. You've got your picks. Your team sucks ass. Take the first pick in 2024 too, because you're gonna be next year's Nolan with Bijan, and then in year 2 you'll have Bijan plus whoever's amazing in 2024 plus 3 other guys
I-
from 2023 that are really good.
I don't know. I think next year's Nolan might still be Nolan. I think Bijan by himself will probably max points for Andrew to the second pick again.
That's probably not true because Justin Fields should be able to at least be close.
That's fair. Assuming he can stay on the field.
So, all right, let's get off that trade. We've talked way too long about that trade. It was the best trade so far. Let's move on to the next one. This next one's going to be another doozy. I gave a 23 third, a 25 third, and I got Kenny Gainwell. Give me your thoughts on that.
So the 23 third is Colin Nolan's, which is going to be the first pick in the 3rd round. It's damn near a 2nd round pick. That alone for Gainwell is too much for me. Maybe Gainwell finds somewhere that is going to give him more run. Maybe he gets a role on his current team. I don't see either of those things happening in the near future. I don't know why we're giving up 2 third-round picks to get that on my team. I know you like Gainwell, Ty, but I think we've seen enough at this point to know he's not worth that. What are your thoughts?
So I believe Sanders is a UFA this year, and the Eagles don't have a ton of draft capital, or I'm sorry, cap space. So they probably let Sanders walk, which does put Gainwell as the back if they don't add another one, and I'm gonna bet they're gonna add another one somewhere.
Yeah.
But my
But
guess,
that's the dart throw that Ty takes with this trade. If they don't do it, then there's a massive value spike because then Gainwell really is the only running back that they're going to have, and they're a run heavy team, and they're going to use him.
That's
I
fair.
don't, I can't imagine that that's going to happen. So it's completely it's a dart throw, and it's not one with a high probability, but it is something, and I can see the thought process behind it. I don't think it's going to happen. I think by this time next year, Ty maybe ends up trying to drop him or send him to someone for a fourth who has the same hope for the following year or something. But it there's a mask of reward, but there's also I mean for a third, a couple thirds, it is a high. Nolan's third is a high third, so that hurts a little bit. But those thirds are kind of dart throws anymore anyway. So
here's
I'm not upset about it.
part of my thought as well is I have a first and 2 seconds as well. My taxi, I have 4 rookies right now, 2 second years. I'm pretty much out of space already. Andrew's going to run into this problem, right? Where taxi's a problem. I run into this problem because I've had a lot of picks. I've got Amir Smith-Marset and Amari Rogers, both droppable pieces on my taxi. I will find 2 people to take those spots. That we talked about it at one point. Third rounders, there's been 1, maybe 2 that have hit a year out of the 12, and it's not always the 301. Elijah Mitchell was the 306 or 307. There was another third rounder that has been decent, but there's only been 1 or 2 third rounders that have hit over the last couple of years. Yeah, there was a fourth rounder that hit with Khalil Herbert or something. I mean, there was somebody that went late. Davis Mills was the very last pick of our first draft. Like, fine, he's been okay, but he never starts. But like, what is the third round pick? For the upside of what Gainwell could be next year with very little space on cap space, there's a lot of free agent running backs. But a guy like Saquon not going there for a pay cut unless the Eagles can find a way to free up cap. Miles Sanders is probably going to want more than what he's making now.
Which, to be fair, the cap at this point really just seems like an
arbitrary
number because there's teams out there like the Packers were in cap hell all of all in the offseason. Everyone's like, oh, they're going to have to tear their team down. Yet they've still found a way after restructuring a bunch of things to get Rodgers in. They technically had the money for Devontae at one point. So who knows what the Eagles are able to do with that and work the cap magic. That makes no sense. And maybe they add a guy. I think David Montgomery could go there. I think that would be an excellent fit for them. And if they can find the cap, then that makes total sense. And that would absolutely torpedo Gainwell's any value really for him. But at the same time, if they don't, then add a third rounder, give Gainwell the first shot and see if he can take it. And if he doesn't, then give the ball to your third round pick after he's learned to pass block. So, I mean, there's potential there. Probably not for 2/3. I think 1/3 would have felt a little bit better, but yeah. So I think it's more of the value. I think it's more of the value for it. 1/3 feels good. 2/3, especially including the 301, feels high. But obviously, there's a chance, and you're telling me there's a chance. Is this all you need, right?
Sure. So, all right, well, let's move on from that. I like Gainwell. I think he has at least a shot, even if they bring Montgomery in. Montgomery's not going to be an every down workhorse again, I don't think, in the league. So they're going to need another running back to fill in carries if that's the guy they decide to bring in. Personal opinion. We're moving on. All right. So the next one, Nolan sends Hollywood to Jer Fry for a 24 first, a 23 third. Nolan just acquired.
Can we just real quick? I'm so proud of you, bud.
Fireworks.
I didn't add the $30 of Monopoly money because he didn't put it back.
No.
I honestly just thought he was screwing with me on the Monopoly money, so I didn't add it. So if he's mad I didn't switch over Fab, or if they switched it over in the trade, whatever. Listen, when you're putting it in the trade chat, don't screw with me. Put Fab so I know that this is an actual part of the trade, because knowing
Either
Jeremy
way,
and knowing
Fab's
Jeremy and Nolan,
very
that's a
meaningless in this league.
right. But anyway, Nolan, great work on moving Hollywood. You bought him for what, a 25 first, and then you moved him for a 24 first and a third.
Plus.
Mm-hmm.
So good work flipping that for a year up and an extra pick.
Yeah, and for how we feel about Jerfry's side, go watch our last video where we roasted Nolan for paying a first-round pick for a guy who might be wide receiver 3 on his own damn team. Because we don't know. We still haven't seen Hollywood come back and play with Hopkins and Rondale, and Kyler's in mid Call of Duty season at this point. So,
And George looked pretty good too, just this last week.
yeah, a
So
lot of unknowns with Hollywood.
there's a lot of guys to feed over there. I don't get this side for Jared Fry. It does. I don't even think it really helps them this year, which is where they've kind of been heading. So I don't really get it. But I mean, if you like the talent, you like the talent. You know, Fryer is was down there in Phoenix for a while. Maybe he's got some contacts that were saying that Hollywood's going to come back and be amazing. I don't know.
He's a 25-year-old wide receiver that played well. Even if you're not big on it for this year, I think it's fine moving forward. I don't think Rondale can be the alpha. Not that Marquise Brown is a huge guy, but I think Brown is going to be more of the one if Hopkins falls off. So even if it doesn't play great for this year, we also just talked about Jeremy's wide receiver depth earlier with his last trade for Paris Campbell. Do I think he overpaid with a first and a third? For sure. But I think it makes sense to go get a wide receiver. And if that was the one that was on the block, I guess that's the one you get. But
yeah, I like that they went for it, that they're trying to stay competitive, but that price is rough for Hollywood.
Yep. So, all right, let's move to the next one. So Jared Fry sends their 25 first and second to Mattoon for Kamara, a 24 third. This was on the back. Let's kind of lump this one here. This was on the back of Jared Fry also trading out Zeke. So Jared Fry moved Zeke for a 24 first. So essentially he sent a 25 first, got a 24 first back. So cancel that out. He got Kamara, moved Zeke, and then he got a third back for a second.
Yeah. So here's how I break it down. He turned Zeke into Kamara. I think that's a win.
Yep, I'd agree.
He moved up a year in first round picks. Clear win. He gave a 23 third. Nope.
He gave a 25 second for a 23 third.
He gave a 25 second and got back 2/3, 1 in 23 and 1 in 24. That's about a wash.
Yeah.
So a win, and a wash, chunking that out. That's some good trading.
Yep.
Helps offset the Hollywood deal.
I like Jared Fry's end of this for sure. Getting Kamara, even with a suspension possibly looming, they're going for it this year. If Kamara ends up getting a suspension for 4 or 6 games next year, I mean, he can sit for 6 games and come back strong. I mean, let him rest for a little bit, come back, play. He should be fine. Nobody's going to overtake him in that Saints backfield. So I like what Jared Fry did here. So then Mattoon,
he picks up that 25 first that he gave up in the Jonathan Taylor deal.
Yeah, but he got it is what I was talking about with even Boyer with Dak. Like, yeah, he got Dak, but he can easily find one of those later, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so he got a 25 first and second for Kamara. So I I think holding Kamara might have been the move. I know that he was stacked. He got Jonathan Taylor. I know Mattoon was nervous about the suspension, but I think holding might have been the move and hope that Kamara was more of Kamara next year. And maybe you get slightly more, but at the same time, he gets older. He's 27. So I get it. But Kamara's value is definitely not at a peak Kamara value by any means at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's ever going to be again. I'm more on the Mattoon side of like, if he's suspended for the first 6 games, then when do you trade him? If he comes back, like you're not going to trade him before the season because nobody's going to look at a guy and be like, I'm going to give you a first and a second for a guy who's only playing 2/3 of the season. And then when he comes back and has a slow start, then it's going to be tough to move him. And then he has 2 good games before the trade deadline. And you're like, look, he's good. And everybody's going to be like, hey, he's 28. Like, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
think you get more than this later.
but Hopkins got a first this year.
That's
And he
true.
was
And
suspended.
Hopkins has been doing really good since he came back. So maybe it looks like that. But
Wide receiver longevity is a little bit different than running back longevity. I mean, I could
True.
see Hopkins playing well at 32, 33, and he's what, 30, 31? Well,
Yeah.
Kamara, as soon as he hits 28 and he has a couple of those good games going into the trade deadline, people are like, yeah, but like this guy's legs could fall off any minute now. I mean, we know it. So wide receiver longevity is definitely going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, but running back prices are higher too. Like if you went and tried to get Derrick Henry,
right.
Don't keep
right,
going. Go ahead.
I think Ty was freaking out when my camera zoomed in super hard.
Boyer's playing with his new camera, so it just threw
No,
me off.
it does that. It focuses on me when I talk. It like zooms me in and out automatically.
dramatic effect.
Yeah, so I started talking and it zoomed in, and Ty's eyes were like, "Whoa!"
Sorry, go on. Something about Derrick Henry.
Oh, I was just saying, like, you know, there is a market for a running back who's still performing at a 27, 28 years old. And, you know, if Alvin Kamara does next year what Hopkins is doing this year and comes back and has a month of, hey, I'm still very good at football, then your first and your second is still there for you. I don't know that you get more than that, and that's a lot of ifs in there too. So I say take it now while you can, but like just because he's old doesn't mean that he's for sure not going to have value, because there are guys, and like a good running back is worth their weight in gold because they're hard to come by. So if he does it, then he's going to maintain some sort of value to a contender that wants to make a move for now, but he's got to keep doing it, and he is getting up there.
So, all right. So then let's finish this with Boyer gets Zeke and his third back this year for a 24 first. I like it for this year. Boyer's in the playoffs. Gonna make a run. Pollard's taken over at least a good 50-50, but both of them are startable. And we talk about that all the time in the other podcast too, where who do you play, Zeke or Pollard? They could both put up 15 points this week. So I like it for this year. I think Zeke will still get a good run next year. So a first for a year and a half of a solid running back, I'm okay with. Especially trying to once again make this move to keep up with a Mattoon or even Andy at this point. Do I like paying the first for him? Not necessarily, but I see Boyer's position as well.
That's two Cowboys that we
This
see
is the
it,
second time
like
we've said this, right? So like in the same, this is the exact same as the Dak thing, because Boyer has Zeke now, and I do think it's an upgrade, but it's not a big one. Like now he's benching Najee and he's benching Damian Pierce. like, yeah, like this makes him slightly better going into playoffs. It gives him a slightly better chance at beating Mattoon. Mattoon's still a heavy favorite, and Boyer's now 2 firsts in the hole to be this much better to maybe squeak past Mattoon. That's tough. That's a rough spot to have to lose 2 firsts to gain an inch. I get it, but it's starting to pile up on you, bud. How you feel?
I feel fine. I still have a 23 first and a 24 first, and I've got a bunch of I've got at least, I think I've got 2 seconds in the 24th, like three thirds in the 23rd. Like I've got a bunch of picks. I'm not
So what
worried
I
about it.
heard is you have 2 firsts now instead of 4.
Right, but
That's a
I
lot
think
different.
when I was looking at my team, so Jeremy at the strike of midnight, technically after, was shooting me text messages like 2 minutes left of the game. It was like, "Hey, you interested in Zeke?" And I was like, "Yeah, I might be interested in Zeke for whatever, like a single first is what I assumed that he would go for." Jeremy and Fry offered the extra third, and I was like, "Oh well, then yeah, if I can get a little extra or whatever, then yeah, for sure." Um, at that point, Damian Pierce has now been struggling for 2 weeks. I can't trust him now. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe Najee can come in, and then
Najee got hurt.
he got the abdominal injury. Now I didn't want to overreact to that, and I think Najee will probably be fine. So I'm not saying that that's the reason that I made it, but I was kind of looking. I was like, man, like I am, like without that, it's Jamal Williams and Pacheco, and that's not going to get it done in the playoffs. Like
I mean,
put
Jamal
Mattoon
Williams has
aside.
been great.
Like I'm just Mattoon is not going to like put Mattoon aside. The other players in the playoffs could beat me with their running backs. My running backs have just been so up and down that aren't named Eckler, and I figured that Zeke would be just a constant. He's good for like 12 points a game. Maybe we'll have a little bit of a bigger game. I think that those big ceiling games are probably behind him with Pollard getting so much work. But if I could just get 12 points out of that spot next to Eckler, who's getting 20 to 30 or whatever, um, with my wide receivers and tight ends, I feel really good about that. And I just didn't feel like I could trust the running backs that I did have on my roster to do that for me. So
let me ask you this, because this is how I like to look at it. You added Dak, you added Zeke. Now that we have the benefit of hindsight, how would you feel if instead of having Dak and Zeke, you had taken those picks and gotten Mahomes, or taken those picks and gotten Diggs, like a more significant upgrade for this year?
yeah, I tried to, and it didn't work out for me. And we were at the trade deadline, so it was make a move
Sure,
or go home. So
that I
and
understand. I just mean like with the
yeah,
hindsight.
oh yeah, no, I was trying to do that. Even after the Dak trade, I was still trying to move multiple firsts for a big splash upgrade. And there were some people that ghosted me. I didn't hear anything from them. I was offering like 2 firsts and then extra picks. I was throwing things at guys. I was not involved in the Diggs talks. That was not something I was privy to. That's just it is what it is. Um, and then when I was looking around the league, like we're kind of set up a little weird right now where not a lot of like big, I guess not a lot of teams are set up to sell right at the trade deadline. I mean, Jer Fry did, but they also added a bunch. They were just kind of wheeling, dealing, moving guys around. But nobody was like, okay, my season's over. It looks like I'm going to rebuild. For me, Matt was one of those guys who probably should have been looking at his team, been like, I might want to consider a rebuild here. And I was throwing picks at Saquon for him. So
I tried to get
that's what
Kelsey off him. I'm like, hey, Kelsey's
yeah,
32. I need a tight end
it's
bad. You're not making playoffs. And he's like, I'm
right.
not moving him. I'm like,
Yep.
I can't do anything more than ask.
So the few teams that were in that position just weren't doing anything. I wish I was in the talks with Diggs. I don't know if I would have been able to get much more than what they ended up getting for him, but I tried to do that. It didn't work out. So plan B is okay, let's go get some consistent players. Zeke is still a good player. He's still going to get solid production. Dak Prescott, same way. He's going to get solid production. He's going to keep me in games, especially if Herbert continues to falter. So I don't feel real great about it. We've talked about it. I don't like the trade necessarily, but I felt like it was kind of a necessary evil almost. And if it wins me a championship, great. And if it doesn't, I'm still in just fine position with the amount of picks I've got going forward that I'm not worried about it. My team's young enough to, like Ty said, to that'll be fine. So
Yeah. And even if you have to sell them at a loss, you can still sell them. Like if you
right.
get a
I mean,
second rounder out of both of them, and
right.
you tried for this year, it's not the end of the world. I just had to ask.
You know, it's just like moving down around for a half year rental.
Yeah,
So
life. You gotta shoot your shot.
All right. So before we hit the last trade, we've got to hit my favorite segment because I have to. So we're going to do a little how? What you drinking? Andy, show me that water cup.
Yeah, we're intermittent fasting in our house, so I was done eating at 7 today. And drinking. No calories after 7, so water.
That a boy. One of us is committed.
I think
Boy,
that's
what do
just
you
called
got?
Bud Light, isn't it? I,
We call it Coors Light around here or Budweiser. It's either church
right.
beer or
I mean,
sponsored beers.
I'll say I'm the one usually drinking Natty Light. I don't have any reason to talk. Tonight I was going with Guinness, uh,
Nice.
but then
Calories.
I did switch to water later. So
I am down to the last little bit, but peach whiskey and Sprite. So
Cool.
one of
That
my
sounds good.
favorite drinks. If you're watching and maybe to this point, go ahead, tell me what you're drinking so I can check out your beers. See how this works.
Ooh, we might actually get someone to comment or something on that one. Good job, Ty.
Yeah, I like it. Little contest. It's a
I want to check.
contest.
I want to check out your beers.
Or cocktails. I like cocktails. Let me know what's your cocktail of choice. I like the Negroni.
Andy likes cocktails. Yeah. All right. Sorry, YouTube. Can't say that.
Wordplay.
Let's move to the last trade. This trade was unposted except for in Sleeper, which blew my mind because everybody posts everything except for Jerfry, which is where it came from. So Jerfry traded Higbee, Jamison Williams, and a 25 third, and Lesack gives back Hawkinson and a 24 first. I actually love this trade for Jerfry. Moving Hawkinson for Higbee made 0 sense in Lesack's current complete teardown. Giving up a first for Jamison Williams, like, okay, cool. Because like he was a 106, 107 this last year in the draft. All right, move a first to get a first, whatever. But we've not seen it out of Jamison. He's been injured. I get the hype around him. I don't know. Hopefully it works out for you because, like Andy said, that's one of your rebuilding pieces. But for Jeremy to get Hawkinson for Higbee and pull a first, like, I'm all about it. The 25 third, I don't care about that pick at this point. So Hawkinson and a 24 first for Higbee and Jamison Williams. Jamison Williams was worth that first, straight up. Get rid of those. Then you're looking Higbee for Hawkinson, and then that third's thrown in there. Like, I'm taking Hawkinson all day over Higbee.
Hawkinson's been real hot since he moved to Minnesota. He's 25 years old. He's tight end 4 on the year behind Kelsey, Andrews, and Taysom Hill's one huge game. So Hawkinson's tight end 3 right now. That's pretty good. And getting Hawkinson and a first out of JMO, who has yet to play in the league. I love JMO. I'm super high on him, but Jerfry drafted him at the 107. He hasn't played yet because he's been hurt. I don't see why his value would have increased in that time, and they upgraded tight end and pulled a first out of him. Great deal for Jerfry.
And if Burns misses playoffs, he could be a bottom 6 pick.
True.
So, I don't know.
This is Andrew getting one of those cornerstone pieces that we were talking about. So he gave up a good tight end to do it. We talked about Andrew being in a rebuild and not having much of a shot in the next couple of years, barring a lot of aggressive trading. And by the time that he gets back around to being good again, then Hawkinson's probably not quite as talented in the fantasy football, but maybe he is. He's only 25. I just feel like if you had sold Hawkinson separately, then you probably could have gotten a first. I think I might have paid a first round pick for him, needing a tight end. I didn't know he was available, and then it looks like you paid 2 firsts for JMO.
Yep.
Yeah, without knowing, I did not know Hawkinson was that good tight end wise on the year. Having Andrews, I didn't really have to, but uh, but when I mean you look at this, the name value there, the fact that he was included in the trade did kind of made my eyes bug out of my head a little bit. Um, uh, my worry with Jameson Williams is that it's not like Amon-Ra is not the real deal. He is. Right now, Goff is their guy. He's not going to be. I don't know. I assume that he'll be changed out next year, but who knows? I don't think he's going to be capable of really supporting two wide receivers necessarily in the Lions offense who like to run and they're trying to play more defense and they're doing a good job of it. And Jameson Williams is a lot like Devonta Smith weight and height wise. Devonta Smith is 6'1", 170. Jameson at playing weight was 6'1", 180. And we've seen those like smaller guys not quite transition into the NFL very well, at least in their first couple years. Devontae's been fine by all means, but he's not been, whatever the hell Andrew just paid for a guy like that. So even if he's healthy, I imagine it's going to take a couple years for him to probably develop into that body, bulk up a little bit, and get worked into NFL
On
bulk.
Andrew's
So,
roster, he has that time.
and he's got the time. I'm just saying is that I don't know if I don't think I would have paid that for that player. It would have been different maybe if he came back 3 weeks ago and he showed some flashes or something, and it showed that the Lions did trust him. They wanted to use him. They showed some big play potential, sure, but he's just a complete unknown at this point, and that's a tough pill to swallow. If you're Andrew, because there's every real reality, especially after the injury he's coming off of, that he doesn't come back still and isn't fully healthy throughout all of next year. And then by that time, he could just be an injury prone type player. We've seen it happen with wide receivers where they come out with these type of injuries and they just never get back to whatever athleticism that they had before. So I don't really get that one. I think it would have been just better to trade Hawkinson for a second and hold on to the first, but that's just me.
Yep. You could have easily gotten two seconds for Hawkinson.
Right, but I'm thinking like
possibly a first.
Right, like if you're just throwing Hawkinson out there, I was like, okay, like a second would probably make sense. Andy over here just said he'd give him a first, but if that's what you're doing, move Hawkinson for the second, take the pick, keep the first, and then if you want to package that first and second for somebody else later that is a more known quantity that's healthy, that's how you start becoming known as Dr. Andrews, when you start adding guys who are already injured onto your roster. So it's a risky move. It might work out, but that's a very risky move for me with the value that he paid.
Yep. So, all right. Well, that's going to wrap up our trades, wrap up our playoff picture. We'll see how things go moving forward. Andy, Boyer, Mattoon, if you guys miss playoffs, Andy, you can't miss playoffs. But Boyer, Mattoon, if you miss playoffs, you done screwed up. The rest of you, good luck fighting it out for playoffs. Boyer, you got something you want to say?
Yeah. Who you guys got winning the championship? Don't talk playoffs. Just who you got winning right now?
Mattoon. Smart money's on Mattoon.
Yeah.
I like Andy. I like his path. I like Andy's path.
Let's be real. Mattoon's only weak spot is Njoku at tight end, and that's still better than my tight end. So I have no way of gaining any ground on him because his entire roster is better than my entire roster.
Well, Andy, if you stay the number 1 seed, at least you get to play Jer Fry or Kelly.
That's my point. I like it. I like Andy's
Fair.
path. Colin could get tripped up for no reason on that first game. So
Against Boyer, that's what you're counting on.
Right? With Zeke and Dak leading the way.
Yeah, so I still got to hold on to the 1 spot.
Since we're doing it real quick, then Jer Fry or Kelly going to win that last matchup?
Burns.
Ooh.
Whoa. I'm going to go with Jer Fry.
Yeah, I'm going to take Jer Fry for the last playoff spot, as much as I hate to say it, because I'd love
Chase
to beat
coming back. I like Burns.
Yeah.
You've been pushing for Jer Fry not to make a playoff, so that way they go to points max four, and you get a better pick out of there first. But I'm worried that's going to work against you here. The fantasy guys are going to push them into the playoffs, so that way you can't
Yeah.
rely on it.
Yep, for sure. So, all right, with that, enjoy the football, and we'll talk to you guys at some point coming forward here. We're out.